If this reached you now, it wasn't random. It wasn't an algorithm. And it wasn't meant to reach everyone. It found you because you've been feeling something you couldn't explain. Not pain exactly. Not sadness. Just a quiet heaviness that sits with you even on good days. You wake up tired, even after rest. You lose focus in moments where you used to feel sharp. Your energy fades faster than it should, especially after certain conversations, certain thoughts, certain nights alone with your mind. And you've probably told yourself it's stress, or burnout, or that you're just going through a phase. But deep down you sense something else. Something subtle has been feeding quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would alarm anyone around you. Just enough to keep you slightly off balance. Just enough to make you doubt your own clarity. Just enough to blur your inner signal. You're not lazy. You're not broken. And you're not losing your power. You're experiencing an invisible drain. You noticed it in the small moments first. When silence stopped feeling restorative and started feeling heavy. When your thoughts began looping instead of landing. When joy required effort instead of arriving naturally. This drain doesn't announce itself. It blends in with routine. It hides inside familiar emotions. Because what's feeding on you doesn't come through fear. It comes through familiarity. It attaches itself to places in you that already hurt. Places you learned to ignore. Places where you once told yourself, "This is just how I am." You may have felt it strongest at night. In the quiet. When distractions fall away and your inner world gets louder. A strange sense that something is leaning on your awareness. Borrowing your attention. Pulling your focus away from your own center. And the most confusing part? You didn't invite it consciously. That's because these attachments don't enter through intention. They enter through openness. Through sensitivity. Through the very qualities that make you a chosen one. You feel deeply. You notice what others ignore. You absorb emotional undercurrents without trying. And that makes you luminous. But it also makes you noticeable in ways you were never taught to protect. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Because when your energy drops, you blame yourself. When your motivation fades, you question your discipline. When your mind feels cloudy, you assume something is wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if your exhaustion is information? What if your distraction is a signal? What if the heaviness you feel isn't yours, but something that's been quietly sitting in your emotional field, feeding off unresolved space? You don't feel attacked. You feel drained. And that distinction matters. Because what drains you doesn't want to scare you away. It wants to stay unnoticed. You weren't weak when it started. You were open. That's the part most people misunderstand. Nothing enters your inner world through force. Not something subtle. Not something patient. It enters through places where you already learned to doubt yourself. Moments where your feelings were dismissed. Times you were told you were too much, or too sensitive, or overthinking. Situations where you felt something deeply, and then convinced yourself you were wrong for feeling it. Those moments didn't just hurt. They taught you to leave parts of yourself unattended. And unattended spaces don't stay empty. You may remember when you first began shrinking yourself, lowering your voice, holding back your truth, choosing peace over honesty, even when it cost you clarity. At the time, it felt like survival, adaptation, maturity. But each time you invalidated your own inner signal, a small crack formed. Not a dramatic break, just a subtle opening. These openings don't feel dangerous. They feel familiar. Shame isn't loud. Self-doubt isn't aggressive. It whispers. It sounds like reason. It sounds like humility. It sounds like being realistic. And that's why it's such an effective entry point. Attachments don't enter through fear. They enter through pain you already recognize. Through old narratives you replay automatically. Through beliefs you never chose consciously, but learned by repetition. You may have noticed this pattern. Whenever you step toward something aligned, something meaningful, something honest, an inner hesitation appears. Not panic, not resistance, just a soft pull backward. A thought like, now isn't the right time. Or, who do you think you are? Or, maybe later when you're more ready. And you listen to it because it feels like it's coming from you. But it isn't intuition. It's conditioning echoing inside your nervous system. Those emotional wounds weren't just experiences. They became pathways. Every time you doubted your worth, every time you questioned your perception, every time you ignored your inner knowing to keep the peace, you unintentionally taught your system to stay open in the wrong places. And something learned to rest there. Not dramatically. Not constantly. Just enough to redirect your energy away from expansion. This is why healing alone didn't fix the exhaustion. Why insight didn't immediately bring relief. Why awareness helped, but didn't fully clear the weight. Because the issue isn't your understanding. It's where your attention has been leaking. You were never broken. You were interrupted. At some point, the voice became familiar. So familiar that you stopped questioning where it came from. It spoke in your own tone. Used your own language. Appeared right when you needed guidance. And that's why you trusted it. You assumed it was intuition. Or self-awareness. Or maturity finally settling in. But intuition never turns against you. This voice does. Not aggressively. Not cruelly. It undermines you quietly. You may have noticed it during moments of stillness. When you were about to take a step forward, express something real, or allow yourself to feel hopeful. That's when it intervenes. It doesn't say, don't do it. It says, be careful. It doesn't say, you'll fail. It says, lower your expectations. It doesn't attack you. It redirects you. And that's the key difference. This voice didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned. It formed from echoes of the past. From people who spoke over you. From moments where your truth was questioned long enough that you began questioning it yourself. Over time, those external voices moved inside. They settled into your internal dialogue. And one day, without realizing it, you started responding to them as if they were your own thoughts. This is where many chosen ones get confused. Because the voice sounds reasonable, protective, even wise. But notice what it does to your body. When it speaks, your chest tightens. Your energy drops. Your enthusiasm dims. True inner guidance expands you. Even when it challenges you. This voice contracts you. It keeps you small enough to manage. Quiet enough to overlook. Uncertain enough to delay. And here's the realization that changes everything. If a voice consistently leads you away from your own alignment, it is not coming from your core. It's an echo. An echo that learned where you hesitate. An echo that repeats itself until you mistake it for instinct. This is how control becomes internalized. Not through domination, but through repetition. Once a thought is repeated enough times, it stops feeling like a suggestion and starts feeling like truth. You didn't choose this voice. You inherited it, and something else learned to speak through it. Not by creating new thoughts, but by amplifying the ones that already weaken you. This is why arguing with it never worked. Why positive affirmations felt forced. Why silencing it seemed impossible. You weren't meant to fight it. You were meant to recognize it. Because once you see a voice as an echo, it loses its authority. You may have asked yourself why the same situations keep finding you. Different faces, different settings, but the same emotional ending, the same disappointment, the same overgiving, the same moment where you walk away feeling lighter without the other person, but heavier inside yourself. This isn't coincidence. Patterns don't repeat because you're unaware. They repeat because something benefits from familiarity. You noticed how your focus drifts at specific times. Not randomly, but when you're close to clarity. When you sit down to do something meaningful, your mind suddenly wanders. Old memories surface. Unrelated thoughts pull you away. It feels like distraction, but distraction is rarely accidental. Your attention is energy. Where it goes, your life follows. And something learned how to redirect it just enough to keep you cycling. Certain relationships act like recharge points. They don't explode. They don't collapse dramatically. They linger. They pull you back into roles you've outgrown. Listener, fixer, emotional anchor. You leave those interactions feeling drained, yet strangely compelled to return. Because emotional residue is powerful. Unresolved feelings create loops. Loops create predictability, and predictability is easy to feed from. This is why the same dynamics keep resurfacing. Not because you want them, but because they keep your awareness occupied. When you're caught in emotional processing, you're not fully present. When you're replaying conversations, you're not anchored in now. That absence is where your energy leaks. You may have blamed yourself for lacking discipline, for not being consistent, for losing momentum. But momentum disappears when attention is fragmented, and your attention has been pulled in too many directions for too long. Notice this. The loops don't usually involve your growth. They involve your doubts, your worth, your value, your place. They ask the same questions over and over, never offering resolution. That's not reflection. That's hijacking. True self-inquiry brings insight. Loops bring exhaustion. And the more tired you are, the easier it is to keep you cycling. This is how power stays diffused, not taken, scattered. You've probably noticed it without naming it. Certain people in your life leave you feeling lighter, yes, but also smaller. Not through cruelty, not through argument, not even through obvious criticism. It's subtler than that. A glance that questions your choices. A concerned comment that undercuts your instinct. A pattern of interactions where your ideas are acknowledged but never fully held. These people don't need to attack you openly. They benefit quietly from your doubt, from your hesitation, from the times you hold back instead of stepping fully into your own truth. Friends, family, partners, coworkers. Anyone who relies on your energy being available for them will unconsciously, or sometimes consciously, keep you slightly off-center. You've probably asked yourself, why do I feel exhausted around certain people, even when nothing is wrong? This is why. Your uncertainty is useful. Your distraction is profitable. Your self-doubt is a resource they tap into without realizing it. It doesn't mean they are bad people. It doesn't even mean they consciously intend harm. It simply means the ecosystem you inhabit thrives on the energy of incompleteness, on hesitation, on the parts of you you haven't fully claimed yet. The key is awareness. Ask yourself gently, who benefits when I doubt myself? Who feels safer if I step back? Not in anger, not in judgment, but as a quiet observation. When you see this clearly, the pressure of others' expectations begins to lose its weight. The subtle pull to shrink becomes visible. And when you notice it, you can begin to step out of it. Isolation doesn't come from being too different. It comes from seeing clearly what used to keep you small. And speaking of isolation, you may have felt it already. That subtle shift where life seems to pull away from you. Friends drift. Conversations stop flowing. Opportunities feel distant, even when you reach toward them. And a quiet thought slips in, I'm too different. I'm alone now. This is the final trick. The one that feels like exile, but is actually selection. Isolation isn't a punishment. It's a filter. A natural separation that occurs when your energy rises above the frequency of what no longer serves you. The mind tries to convince you it's fear. That solitude is loss. That being apart is a sign something is wrong. But here's the truth, it isn't. Your growth doesn't isolate you, it realigns you. It removes what is not in harmony with your energy. It creates space for what belongs. For the people, opportunities, and experiences that match your newly expanded awareness. Notice the pattern. When something stops fitting, it falls away quietly. Not with drama, not with conflict, but with silence. And that silence can feel like emptiness. But emptiness is fertile ground. It is the pause before creation. The space in which your next alignment will form. You've been trained to fear being alone. To fear that your uniqueness is a liability. But in reality, this separation is the signal your energy is rising. It is your personal calibration in motion. Soon, the weight of old attachments, old loops, old doubts will begin to lift naturally. You'll notice your energy no longer lingers where it was drained. Your presence begins to reclaim itself. And this is where power returns. Quietly, subtly, without force. Now is the moment where everything begins to shift. The drain, the echoes, the loops, the small doubts, they no longer have to hold space in your life. Power returns when you start keeping promises to yourself. Small ones at first. A quiet commitment to rest when your body asks. To speak when your truth rises. To step away when your energy signals no. Self-trust isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's a quiet, unwavering alignment with your own knowing. And every time you honor it, even in a tiny way, you starve the attachments that have fed off your uncertainty. Boundaries are sacred. Not because they punish others, but because they protect the energy you need to flourish. Say yes only when your heart is fully present. Say no without guilt when your energy is being drawn away. Notice the difference between obligation and alignment, between habit and desire, between external expectation and internal truth. Self-compassion becomes your anchor. You start holding space for your own mistakes, your own growth, your own imperfections. Not as a crutch, but as recognition of your humanity. And in that compassion, the old patterns lose power. Your desires, when acknowledged honestly, act like magnets. They pull experiences, people, and opportunities that match your energy. They illuminate your path, rather than being dimmed by doubt. And finally, integrity, living in alignment with your own truth, becomes the ultimate shield. It doesn't push away selectively. It doesn't fight. It simply radiates clarity. And anything misaligned naturally falls away. The more you center yourself, the less room there is for interference. The more you honor your energy, the less it can be hijacked. The more you trust your inner guidance, the less you respond to echoes of the past. This is the space where freedom begins. Quiet, unwavering, luminous. What you're feeling now isn't relief in the dramatic sense. It's clarity. The kind that settles in slowly. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that feels like coming home to yourself after a long absence. You begin to see it clearly. You were never broken. You were never weak. You were never behind. You were interrupted. Interrupted by voices that weren't yours. By emotional weight you absorbed instead of questioned. By roles you stepped into before you knew you were allowed to step out. And once you see that, the story changes. The inner narrative softens. The constant self-explanation fades. The urge to prove, justify, or overextend quietly dissolves. You stop carrying emotions that don't originate in you. You stop replaying moments that no longer require resolution. You stop answering calls that drain you, even when they arrive as thoughts. Your mental space begins to open. Silence no longer feels heavy. It feels clean. You notice how much energy returns when you stop feeding what never fed you back. How much clarity arrives when you stop negotiating with doubt. How natural confidence feels when it isn't forced, only remembered. Awakening isn't an explosion. It's a release. A release of borrowed fear. Of inherited limitation. Of identities that were built around survival instead of truth. You don't become someone new. You become uninterrupted. And in that state, freedom isn't something you chase. It's something you allow. Your awareness sharpens. Your intuition clears. Your emotional field stabilizes. Not because you fought anything away, but because you stopped giving energy to what never belonged there. This is what reclamation feels like. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. And if this reached you now, it's because this phase is already unfolding within you. Nothing to fear. Nothing to force. Only space to inhabit. Only truth to live from. Stay here for a moment. Let the silence settle. You've returned to yourself. You've walked through the hidden currents, the quiet drains, the loops and echoes that kept you small. You've seen the voices that weren't yours. You've noticed the patterns that distracted and delayed you. And now, you're beginning to reclaim the energy, clarity, and inner space that is always rightfully yours. This is your awakening, not a sudden burst, but a gentle unfolding. A recalibration of your mind, your emotions, your energy. A return to the integrity, self-trust, and inner guidance that never truly left you. Now it's time to act. Time to honor the boundaries, commitments, and desires that feed your growth. Time to release fully what was never yours to carry. If you feel called, start tonight. Pause and notice what has been draining you. Set a quiet boundary for yourself, even in thought. Reclaim one small piece of energy that you've been giving away. Because every small step toward alignment matters. Every conscious choice builds momentum. And every moment you trust yourself strengthens the freedom you were always meant to experience. If this message resonated, don't let it end here. Take a breath, journal your reflections, and allow yourself to move forward in clarity. You are a chosen one, and your awakening is unfolding exactly as it should. Subscribe for more spiritually aligned guidance and energy activation content. Like, share, and comment your experience. Your energy matters. Return whenever you need this reminder. Your freedom is already within you.